Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Joseph Jute, Chief Technology Officer at Net Solutions, and I have spent nearly 3 decades helping brands build cutting-edge digital experiences. Today, we are here to learn. More specifically, we are here to talk about something that has become the backbone of modern digital experiences: data-driven personalization. Customers expect content that speaks directly to their needs, preferences, and behaviors. And businesses can no longer rely on one size fits all content approaches. In today's webinar, Data Driven Personalization 101, Building a Winning Strategy with Contentful CMS, we will explore how to create highly personalized experiences using structured content, AI, and automation. To help us navigate this exciting topic, we have an incredible expert with us, Richard Beck. Richard is a seasoned product management leader with a track record of driving over $35 million in net new revenue and scaling product portfolios by 135%. With expertise in AI, ML, personalization, composable content systems, and B2B SaaS growth, he excels in aligning strategy with execution to deliver measurable impact. He has led teams across Belgium, Germany, and Canada, fostering innovation, efficiency, and high-performing product teams. Richard, the stage is all yours.
Wonderful. Well, Joseph, that was an incredible introduction. Thank you. I'm really delighted to be here to talk about a topic that I find absolutely passionate, that I'm passionate about. And, frankly, we're on the edge of a really, really big change in the online digital experience. So let me cover a little bit, some of the things that we're hoping to cover today. So really the key parts of our discussion will be really, understanding how personalization will change the web experience, reviewing the data needs to work around that. We'll talk a little bit about how composable content and composable architecture with systems such as Contentful can enable this new world. We'll talk then about optimization, automation, and then we'll finish off with deployment strategies. And of course, we'll leave a little bit of time for Q&A for everyone who is online. So if you want to drop your question into the chat as you're going along, we'll answer as many of them as we can during the webinar.
Richard, let's start with the definition. What is web personalization?
Yeah, and that's really the fundamental question because, we have, we've talked about personalization for many, many years, and I think a little bit of what we understand by that has changed. So if you ask someone, let's say 10 years ago, what do you mean by personalization? They'd say, put "Hi Richard" at the top of the website, right? And, we've moved on so far from there. The way I define personalization is providing the right information to a web visitor, to a digital visitor at the right time, depending on where they are in their customer journey, right? And really making sure that we provide experiences and information that's really pertinent for them and that will help them reach their goal and will help the business reach their goal as well, right? So I always think it's good to illustrate that with some examples. So, as I'm going through the webinar, I'm going to use examples from the B2B realm and the B2C realm, but let's start with B2B. I was at Autodesk for a long time. We had, a lot of our customers were architects. So fundamentally, what we wanted to make sure at Autodesk is, as an architect came to our web experience, we could provide them information about the products that were appropriate for an architect, case studies that were appropriate. So they'd always have the right kind of information that would speak to them and that they would be able to create that connection with the business, right? And on the B2C world as well, if I'm a man going to, let's say, an apparel website, show me pictures of men men's clothes, right? So it really, really speaks to me, and I feel at home there. So that's what we mean by personalization, is creating the right digital experience with the right content for the right customer at the right time.
Lovely. Now that we have defined what is personalization, let's discuss why is personalization so important. And while you are explaining it, I would appreciate if you could talk from both the customer's point of view as well as from a company's point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really great way of thinking about it, Joseph, because I product manager, like to talk in statistics. So I pulled a few statistics that I found that really kind of explain the customer experience. So this is the first one, number we've got here. It's one that's been around for a while, and it's from Salesforce, and they say that 61% of customers feel like a number. Right? What does that mean? It means 61% of customers feel that businesses don't care about them, right? And if a business doesn't care about you, why should you continue to interact with that business? Why not go to the one that really does care? Um, but what we don't want to do is give customers a personalized experience if they're not going to like it, right? So, there's a great statistic here from McKinsey and Company. They've done a lot of research in the space, where they say 71% of customers do expect a personalized experience. Okay, and I'm going to give a little bit of analogy about that as we go along. And then finally, from our customer side, 52% of customers report higher satisfaction with personalization. Now, I'm going to guess that figure's a little bit lower, and I'm going to guess that as customers experience personalized journeys more and more, that figure's going to edge higher. But again, it's positive customer satisfaction, and that's what every customer wants, every company wants to deliver to their customers. Now, it's all right talking about personalization. Customers seem to want it, but it is an investment. And does it make sense for businesses that are going to lean into it? Well, Deloitte is, asked a lot of retail executives, what they intend to do in 2025, and 40% of them said, we are going to invest in personalization, right? It is a big theme amongst retail executives, and there's a strong understanding out there that we have to do this. Now, in terms of does it generate money? Well, again, McKinsey, who've looked into this quite a bit. Now, the numbers on this do vary a little bit. And if you do just a little bit of personalization, you're going to get a little bit of revenue uplift. If you really lean into it really, really strongly, you'll go beyond 25%. But somewhere in the middle, for a typical company, for a typical lean in, you're going to see about a 25% revenue uplift. Now, in terms of my own experience at Autodesk, when we applied personalization there, we saw about a 27% uptake in add to cart rates. So that aligns, it's not exactly revenue uplift, but it aligns somewhere in the ballpark. And that's the ballpark of experience that I've had, and a ballpark of experience that many companies see as well. Now, last one is from Research and Markets, where they're suggesting in the next few years, 40% of global e-commerce revenue is going to come from personalization. All right. Now, one of the big takeaways of all of this is there's a big lean into personalization. That big lean in is going to generate happier customers. There's a cost to not leaning in. If you decide to do nothing and your competitors do, you're likely to get left behind. Your customers are going to be less satisfied. They'll go to your competition. So there's a little bit of fear there, but that's largely what the statistics say. Now, the question of why is personalization so important? Again, I want to tell a little bit of a story, and the one that always seems to work quite well is talking about buying a big ticket item. So, Joseph, when you go and buy a car, right? So imagine walking into a car dealership, and the first time you go there, the salesman's going to say, Hi, Joseph, welcome. What are you looking for? And you're going to tell them, you say, well, I'm looking for a new car. I've got a family. We need to have, we've got two kids and the dog, and, we like to do road trips. The salesman's going to walk you through different options and why they're good or bad. And you're going to go, okay, I'm going to go and think about it. It's a big ticket item. I've got to think about it. And you go away. And you come back a few days later. Now imagine what would happen if the same salesman asked you all the same questions again. You'd be like, what's going on here? We had this conversation, right? But that's what the vast majority of digital experiences do today, right? Where we would like them to be. Do we want them to be the car salesman that says, hi, Joseph, have you thought about it? What do you need more information about? Can I maybe start showing you colors, right? Versus the car salesman that says, what can I do for you today?
That's a fantastic example, Richard. And now that we have set the stage, why is personalization set for growth?
Yeah, so again, we go back to the stat of, why are 40% of retail executives looking to invest in personalization? Well, my take on it is that there are a few things that have all come together in the last year or so. The technology has reached to a point where the dream of personalization can start being realized. Now, the way I like to look at it, because sometimes it's just easier to simplify things, and ask the question of, well, what do you need to create personalized experience? The first thing obviously is some kind of personalization engine. And there are many out there. The second one is data on your visitors. Right now, clearly, if you don't have and aren't collecting data on your visitors, you can't personalize anything about them. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Um, but the other key point as well is content and experiences, right? So to be able to do personalization, the amount of content that you need to be able to reach it has grown dramatically. Okay. And so, I think there's a level of technological achievement and technological evolution that's made that more possible. Let me show you a study. So here's a study that was done by the University of Vienna. Now, we all remember, we perhaps don't remember the date, but we remember when ChatGPT hit our computers back in November 2022, and all of a sudden you've got tools that can generate text, from a stub, and that was a revolutionary change. Now, the team at the University of Vienna did a study, and they asked people to write an article. And they asked another group of people to write an article with the help of ChatGPT. And they found that, traditionally the group doing things without AI was taking about 4 hours to write an article, which is fair. The ChatGPT people were doing it in 30 minutes. That means they can do 8 more articles in the same time it would have taken to write a traditional one. Now, I'm not suggesting that anyone's going to get that level of efficiency out of a person. But the point being is we've now got the tools to generate a lot more content that we can start using for personalization. Okay. And then I think the other move has been, and this has been happening over the last few years on the CMS side, notably, is the move more into composable architecture, right? And if you kind of think back 10 years ago, we were building web pages one by one, right? And then we moved more into a kind of a headless CMS paradigm. And now we're into a composable paradigm and even a composable content paradigm where you've got your, if you're in the e-commerce space, you've got your product information that's coming from commerce tools and Elastic Path. You've got your web storefront, that's powered by personalization engines such as Ninetailed or Uniform. and you've got your composable content in somewhere like Contentful, right? Where you can plug and play as you need to be able to do, which makes it easier to bring the technologies together to make the temple of personalization possibility.
Great. Now that we are talking about this, let's go a little more deeper, Richard. What data is important for personalization?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a great column of the temple to dive into, because as I mentioned before, it really is key, to be able to provide a personalized experience. So there are many sources of data that you can use to create a profile, if you like, of your customer. Now, the more the customer interacts with you, the stronger your profile is going to be, of course, right? So there are definitely areas where you've perhaps got already some data, some first-party data that you need to make sure you're tracking across your experience. And that can be from, customers that sign in. And, at Autodesk, we had about 35% of customers signed in, which meant the vast majority weren't. I'll come back to that. You've got customers and prospects on target lists that you're going to reach out to through email, through paid media, right? Where you're going to be able to track their customer journeys through. So if you sent an email out that's focused on, let's say, let's use our architecture example again. When someone clicks through from that email, they're interested in architecture, so you can personalize that way. For potentially high value customers, you can use third-party systems such as 6sense or Demandbase, where you can do some level of IP matching that can give you some sense of who they are, what industry they're coming from. And they often use cookie tracking, so can maybe provide a little bit more information about the visitor's role within a company, which can be useful. But I think for most companies, for most visitors, what's going to make the most sense is behavioral. Okay, so what do we mean by behavioral data? Well, as a customer moves through your website, you're going to learn about them by the things that they interact with and the things that they engage with. And every single click is going to help you build up an idea of who they are, right? So for example, we did this at Autodesk, where even just on the first page, we offered an opportunity to say, are you interested in architecture? Are you interested in manufacturing? Are you interested in game development? Which already gave us an initial click through. And every page they went through helped us build up that profile and get a clear idea of who the visitor was. Now, in this world of personalization, if we want to know who a visitor is, we can actually ask them. And we can ask them either implicitly or explicitly. So let me give you an example of actually doing that here. So this is an experience I built at Autodesk as part of a page. And it was a tabbed experience where we put in different roles for a product because we wanted to know, more in depth about, what job function our visitors did. And typically, when you see a tab like this, you always get a drop down in clicks, right? As people kind of just don't necessarily engage in everything. But in this instance, we didn't see that. In this instance, we saw a more jagged pattern because our customers were actually engaging with the job functions that they did. And as soon as someone clicks civil engineers, we know they're a civil engineer. And so for the rest of the experience, we can do things like showing them case studies that are applicable to civil engineers. We can show them and highlight features that are applicable to civil engineers. So think about in your experiences how you can ask or get the information that you need to personalize. Now, an example from B2C. So here's one of my favorite clothing sites, I have to admit, Lululemon. I think they do a fantastic job on their customer experience. But imagine I come to their homepage and I can click on any of these highlighted links as a man and say, I want to see men's clothes. I want to see, what's new for men, right? Now, as I'm going through their experience, what they should be doing, they're not. What they should be doing is if I go back, for example, to the homepage, show me men's clothes. If I go to unisex, apparel like hats, show me pictures of men wearing that hat. You've got the data to provide me that personalized experience that I want, that help me to connect to the product and the brand, right? So these are the key data elements that you need to be able to drive successful personalization.
Fantastic, Richard. Uh, Whenever we are talking about kickstarting a new program within a corporate, we talk about metrics that will drive success. So, what are the leading and the lagging indicators or the metrics that would indicate success of personalization?
Yeah, and this is a really important question for anyone that's thinking about driving personalization in their organization, because you absolutely have to talk about what does success mean for this program? How are we going to measure it? Now, every business is a bit different, and the metrics that are going to be important to you are going to be different. But I just wanted to highlight some of the key ones that most people will track within a particular goal. So if you focus more on e-commerce, obviously visits. So remember saying, I said right at the beginning that if you offer a better experience, you'll get more customers. So you want to see your visitors going up. Personalization, add to cart should likely go up because fundamentally that's what you want to drive to. And again, we saw 27% uplift. And, I've heard other companies saying they're in the realm of 20% as well. In terms of what add to cart increase personalization can drive. Add to cart's not sales. So again, you want to track order rate. And then one of the things we found surprisingly is, especially in a B2B setting, B2B sales cycles can be really long. But at Autodesk, we actually halved some of our time to buy as we provided more personalized content and information. So again, that's another key metric to check. Now, something else we did at Autodesk was to build out a whole knowledge leadership area, which was very, very content heavy, which again is a fantastic use case for something like Contentful and personalization. And again, you want to see here increases in visits, but you're really going to look at increases in engagement because you should be able to be funneling content and articles to visitors that they really want to read and engage with. Okay. Time on page, because again, your articles are more interesting, right? They're more appropriate. And if you've got some element of conversion, such as sign up to a newsletter or, maybe go and look at some other articles, sign up for webinars, we're on one. These are things that you want to be tracking. And again, you would expect to see uplift in all of this as you bring personalization in.
Thanks, thanks, Richard. Especially, I like the metric time to buy. Uh,
Yeah.
I have tracked other metrics, visits, add to carts, and so on and so forth. That the time to buy is something that's new. So I'm going to keep note of that. Uh,
Yeah,
Richard,
that's a surprising one, right? Because you don't think
absolutely.
about it, but the longer it takes to buy, the more likely you've got that customers are going to fall out. So if you can shorten time to buy, you shorten the uncertainty. So you're right to point it out. It is a really, really interesting one.
Yeah. Richard, you earlier talked about the behavioral data.
Yeah.
How do you capture those behavioral data uh, as we move through this journey?
Yeah, no, it's a really great question. And there's a really strong area of what are called CDPs, so customer data platforms that are evolving to take on that role. Um, there are many out there, and I would say to a customer, if you've already got one, use what you've got that's got there and pull information out from it. Even if you've got something that you've built in-house, that can do the job. If you're thinking about moving to a platform such as Contentful, look at what they use for most of their customers. I think Twilio segments really popular there. One thing to be careful with CDPs is you don't use it to put all of your information in. Like you want to use it to put the information you're going to personalize and target customers because it does tend to cost quite a bit to store it. And the typical, length of time that data remains in there is about 6 months. So, if you're about a customer coming to your website every 6 months, you're not really going to have a strong understanding of them, and they're likely a net new visitor every time they come.
So now let's talk about the content systems itself, content management systems itself. What are the characteristics of a content system that will be able to deliver personalized content?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, if we think about what you need for personalization is you need to be able to deliver very specific content to a customer at a very specific time, right? And in the B2B sense, like we had at Autodesk, you've got the people who are going to make a decision to buy something. We typically call that a buying committee, and there are different people within that buying committee. So you've got the end user, you've got people like a team manager, you've got procurement, you've got finance, and they're all going to need different information, right? And they're going to need different information as they're going through their individual buying cycles to get everyone onto the same page. Now, traditional content management systems that were very page focused just can't capture and store and manage that level and need of content. It's just impossible. And that's why you need to go to a more modern composable system such as Contentful, where you can do that. And I was really I was really happy to see Contentful by Ninetailed, which is a personalization engine, because it really helps manage these different experiences. And it's within the platform, so it's easy to do. It's easy to bring the right content in, and it's easy to manage, tests and optimization of different kinds of concept that you want to do. So fundamentally, these are, this is really the kind of system you need to be looking at. If you have a system that doesn't allow you to produce the kind of content that you need for your different customer journeys and your customer different personas, then you need to be looking elsewhere.
Uh, when we talked about the journeys, I only thought about the same persona having multiple journeys, being aware and then shopping and so on and so forth, right? So what you talked about is different personas can come in for the same purchase,
Yes.
and then the content has to be different for that. So that's a fantastic one. Spot on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can give you a bit more of an example. If you think about someone in finance, what do they care about? They don't care about whether the software is easy to use, right? They don't care about whether you can use it on your Mac or your PC. They care about whether there's an ROI. And
Mm,
they care about whether companies like yours have got an ROI,
mm.
right? So you need to make sure that you've got the right information for them. And if you show them an experience that's focused on the end user, they'll just be completely lost and they'll glaze over. And, it's going to be harder to convince them. And that's why personalization can help reduce time to buy.
Got it. Uh, Now that we have talked about different personas and journeys, what are the challenges that marketing teams face in producing such a content?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And it's something that I hear a lot of, that one of the biggest challenges with going to the world of personalization is, marketing teams. And, if you think about it, one, there is a change in mindset that is difficult because if you're moving from a traditional CMS, like a lot of marketing teams are comfortable in things like WordPress, right? And I've got used to that where you're really focusing on a page and you may be adding short codes in. They're mixing they're mixing layout with content. It's not split in. It becomes a management mess. It doesn't scale. But that's what they're used to. So one, there's that mindset shift to saying you need to focus just on the content, and the system and the design of the system, the design of the experience will focus on getting it to the customer at the right time. So, that one is key. And actually, when we did that at Autodesk, when we moved into more of a composable component-based layout and focus, we actually saw page build and page update efficiency increase by 55%, which was, absolutely dramatic. And a lot of that is we got marketing out of worrying about, what things were going to look like. They just focused more on the content. So again, that is a big challenge. I think another big challenge for marketing teams is once you've got content that you can reuse, right, you can reuse it across multiple different channels. So you can reuse it on the website, on mobile device, in emails, right? And often marketing teams can be siloed between different channels and they need to start coming together. Okay, so there can be organizational challenges, and I think that's where it's really interesting to work with a strong partner who can really help work through these different challenges to make things, become, a lot more successful. And then I think one of the other positive sides of this move is that, companies like Contentful are embedding more AI solutions into into their user interface to make it easier for marketing to be able to go in and generate content. For example, they can give a topic and an idea. Contentful can generate text and they can go in and edit it. And again, there are AI image generators that I'm less convinced by the AI image generators, to be honest, but they will get there over time. And that's really going to help marketing teams meet the challenge of the content that they have to produce and scale what they can produce in a really dramatic way and become more powerful marketers.
True, true. Let's talk about a specific industry or a domain. How can Contentful help commerce companies in particular?
Yeah, so again, the commerce companies come with slightly different challenges and bigger challenges and bigger opportunities as well, right? So there are things in commerce such as prices that you have to be really careful about. So a very bad thing to do in content is to take a price and just type it out. Okay, because if that price changes in the back end, not going to change in the front end, customers are going to get upset. It says over here, it says it's this price, and over there, it's that price. I want to pay this price. So you need to make sure that your commerce backend, such as Commerce Tools or Elastic Path, is tied into and integrated into your content system, such as Contentful, so that you can pass in updated product information. Now, the other thing to be aware of as well is if you are in a commerce situation where you want to personalize the display of things like products, right? So let me think of an example. Let's say I bought, this really nice blue jumper or a top, and from a company, and I go back. Well, it would be great for them to maybe propose a shirt that can go with it, right? Or some other complementary products, but you don't want to propose products that you don't have in stock. So, you want to make sure that your backend system is integrated into your personalization engine, so this kind of information can actually flow through and you can personalize the right things. So, that's something that's, I think really, really important. And when you're doing an architectural design for a new content system, that's where you need a strong integrator that can help you pull all these parts together in a way that makes sense.
Correct, correct. Absolutely. A follow-up question, Richard, on this. How can marketers use Contentful to ensure that their content is working?
Oh, yes. So this is again this is really important, right? So if you're now producing all of this extra content, and actually with personalization, you can produce multiple versions of content to see what works. You want to see what works in what context. Now, what we did at Autodesk is we pushed that information into our analytics tool, which was Adobe Analytics, and we made sure that the content was in there as a known item of content with the context it was shown and its engagement rate. So we could actually see the difference between different content and see what was actually performing right. And it's really important to think about that content's going to be used in different contexts. So that context is, absolutely key and important. And if you're using software such as Ninetail, they will have some level of content and performance reporting directly in there. So marketers can go in straight away and see what's actually working. And Ninetail does a personalization engine. You can actually set it to show the content that is working most effectively most, which again is really, really good when we're thinking about going to a future where we can not only personalize the experience for the customer, but use the best resources that we've got for the business to get the best outcomes.
Good. Let's talk some guidance, Richard. In what situations, context, does it make sense to implement composable content and personalization?
Yeah, so if you're just starting off and you've got very few visitors, you're building out your website, it's probably not worth jumping into composable content, right? There's kind of a minimum amount of volume for it really to make sense because there is some level of overhead compared to simpler systems. So I've just pulled up some numbers to give you a rough idea. Now, again, every business is different and every business has got different challenges. So, these numbers might not work for you because you might have different challenges. But as a general rule, number of articles, a number of pages, around about 1,000 minimum. Probably as you get to 5,000, you're going to really, really see and feel more benefits. I did a rough back of the envelope calculation the other day for Autodesk, and Autodesk probably around 10,000 pages, right? So, anything under 1,000, probably not the right time for you. But as you're growing into that, it makes more sense. Now, if you have more content types and you want to be sharing more content between different content types, and what do we mean by content types? Well, articles, product detail pages, product listing pages, landing pages, emails, if you've got that level of complexity, composable content's going to make a lot more sense, right? So again, if you kind of in the 5 area, if you've got like 1,000 pages, you're probably into that area where you've got, that space where you've got about 5 different content types. And again, distribution channels. So we talked a lot about the web and the web experience, but a lot of companies have got mobile apps. A lot of companies want to share content between the web experience and the mobile app because why wouldn't you, right? You want to have one version of the truth. You want to have one set of customer journey personalization content that's there. And again, so the more channels that you have, and some of those channels have got web, mobile, email, but it can also be advertising brokers that you can maybe push some content out to as well. The more it makes sense to have composable content. Now, the one that I think is interesting and makes all of these numbers a little bit more complex is the number of collaborating teams or the complexity of workflows that you might have. Right, so as companies get bigger, you might have more people working on content because you might have someone who's really focused on understanding the product. They might want to have content reviewed by someone who's focused on writing content for decision makers, right? And having a different flow. So you might want to make sure you've got different aspects on it. You might be in a large company that requires validation and formal validation, so workflows are really important. You might be in regulated businesses such as healthcare, where you need to have someone absolutely rubber stamp things. And the more that you can automate that, the more efficiency you get, the higher velocity you get, the traceability and tracking can be really important. So if that's the thing that's the most important for you, even with a smaller number of articles, it can make sense to lean into composable content. So that should give you a good idea of, is composable content, should I be thinking about this? Should I be thinking about personalization? Should I be leaning into it with the size that I have?
Thanks, Richard. This is really helpful. The way we normally approach building these kinds of content, or rather even products, is that we put companies into three stages:
Mhm.
crawl, walk, and run. And when they are starting out, it's in the crawl stage and so on and so forth, right? So this particular table that you have shown and whatever that you've talked about so far, it really fits into that particular paradigm of
Absolutely. So, anything under 1,000 is crawling,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Between medium and ideal, you're walking, and then, beyond ideal, that's where you're really running.
Correct. And then when we are talking about running, Richard, one of the things that will happen, you have talked about a large organization, and when we are talking about a product or a content or a website that's on the run stage, one of the things that we are going to see is uh, pages that have to address multiple geographies, visitors from multiple geographies, right?
Yes.
So can you give some guidance and idea on localization and global content? Can you give me something about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And composable content is fantastic for companies in this different scenario. So to give you an idea, at Autodesk, I think we were in something like 32 different country regions. Uh, sorry, about 36 with about 32 different languages, something like that. It was the level of complexity was high. And you know, what is when we kind of think about what we need to do for localization, it's really interesting to think about splitting it into two things. You've got the language problem, right? So, if you're doing business in France, for example, you want to show customers content in French, right? If you're doing business in Germany, German, this is just, kind of basic and normal. Then thinking about it, you get different flavors of French, right? So in Canada, for example, you've got Canadian French, which, French and Canadian French are completely mutually intelligible. They're the same words, they're just kind of assembled differently and they're going to sound different, right? So you've got different versions. A Canadian can read French very easily, it's no problem. But when you want to make the customer feel comfortable, you're going to want to have the content in Canadian French. When we talk about localization as well, we're also talking about making sure that we have content that speaks to the customer. So let's use the French and the Canadian French example again, right? So let's say I'm an architect and I go to a French website. I want to see case studies about companies and projects in France. Because in France and in the European Union, they've got a certain specific set of norms. They've got different cultural expectations. They've got different legal frameworks. They've got different business cases behind them. So if I'm a customer in France, I don't want to see an article about a Canadian French business. And the Canadian French business doesn't want to see something about a French business because the situations are just very different. Right. So with localization, you kind of got a hierarchy of, can I offer content in that particular locale in the language? If not, can I offer it? Can I offer regional content? Because North American content is probably better than European content, right, for our French Canadian customer. And if not, maybe language specific, and sometimes we just don't offer the content in certain locals. Now, when we bring this back to composable content, why is it great? Well, because basically you're creating pools of content and you can tag them in French, French, and in Canadian French. So the front end can pull out of the content that's available, the content that is most appropriate and most specific. And that's really, really challenging to do on an older style CMS. So if you've got a multilingual site, and you're operating in multiple geographies, specifically in different parts of the world and different continents, composable content's definitely the way to go.
That's a good example that you gave, Richard. I've thought about the tagging content in languages and so on and so forth. But then if you're from Canadian French, probably you need to provide that particular case study, North American case study, rather than a European case study, especially because of the regulatory aspects and all of those kinds of stuff. So
Exactly.
very, very relevant, spot on from a localization point of view. Richard, as we come to the end, do we have any advice on how to integrate Contentful?
Yeah, absolutely. In an ideal world, you're starting from a greenfield site and you can build your architecture out and plan everything out. Most companies aren't there. Most companies have already got some level of CMS already in. Maybe they're finishing crawling, they're beginning to walk, and as a product person, we always hate doing complete rebuilds. So some of the things that we did at Autodesk to really help was, we started integrating Contentful in one part of our website where we had a specific set of users in marketing. So one, we could test integration. We could see how it would integrate with our existing content management system. And we could learn about how our marketing users would use it and how they would feel comfortable with it and maybe some of the challenges that they had. So we could go through a learning phase. The second thing that we did, once we'd covered all of that and we felt comfortable, we started adapting our front end so our components could pull content from the Contentful API, which meant that we could basically switch between content in the current CMS and switch to content into Contentful, which allowed us to gradually roll out and control the gradual rollout and the move from the old CMS into Contentful. So we weren't really disturbing the business and we could move over in a way that managed risk and enabled acceptability. So again, every company is a little bit different from where they are, and every partner you work with might have a different perspective on it. But that's what we've done. We did at Autodesk, and I think for a lot of companies, that's probably going to be a very, very good approach.
Fantastic. What are the final takeaways from this webinar?
Absolutely. So basically, let's remember, personalization is going to change the customer experience. It's going to be positive for customers. It's going to be positive for businesses. The only companies that are going to lose out are those that don't lean into it, right? So, lean in, think about how you're going to do it. Systems such as Contentful are huge enablers of personalization. So, my recommendation is to start today and start planning and start studying and deciding where you want to go.
Fantastic. Thank you, Richard. Any questions from the audience? If you have anything, please put it on the chat so that I will direct it to Richard. Yeah. There's a question here, Richard. What industries do you think benefit the most from using Contentful for personalization and why?
So interesting question. Gosh, I'm going to say pretty much everyone, right? Let me maybe answer it in a different way where it wouldn't be appropriate. One, low volume, but if your customers don't come frequently and there's no real reason for them to come frequently, and you've got nothing to upsell, nothing to cross-sell, um, then, is personalization really necessary? But most companies, if you've got e-commerce and you've got and actually I'm going to tell you a story about the e-commerce. I was in a meeting a few weeks ago with a shoe company, and they said, people only come once a year to buy shoes. And I thought, well, I look at my teenage daughters when they're buying shoes. They'll look a few times, right? So again, there is a small customer journey to push them through. But if you've got exciting items, you want to keep them coming back and engaging, and you want to get a stronger idea of what they like. So I think that most industries, e-commerce, B2B, are absolutely, have got opportunity and potential to gain from personalization.
Richard, you talked about the engagement. While we are talking about engagement, one of the questions that came to my mind is, what about the multi kind of a content, in the sense that when we think about content, we primarily think about either images or text. Say,
Yep.
for example, videos are there.
Yep.
How does personalization kick in there, and how Contentful could help in having that video also presented at the right time in that particular journey?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Contentful's got a digital asset management system built in, so you can put your videos and images in. Um, we talk about text, it's easy to talk about, but you can actually create quite sophisticated experiences and experience options where, let's imagine a page where the first time you visit it, there's a little bit of text, but the second time there's a video, right? Because that's where you've got to in your customer journey, right? You might have, for example, you reach the area in the customer journey where you want to have and be showing customer testimonials. Well, a video customer testimonial with a real customer feels so much more authentic than a line of text, right? So yeah, absolutely. Other things that you can do as well is, be inspired by YouTube, where every time you visit, you get different videos.
Hmm.
You can use personalization to choose what's the most appropriate video that I want to show here for my customer. So yeah, you can absolutely switch things around and show videos and images instead of text. Actually, you could even like small things like background images you can change depending on who people are. If you've got people coming in, for example, from different geographies, you can show geography specific background images that might be just subtle, but can work psychologically to make a customer feel, welcomed and comfortable.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any other questions from the audience? Uh,
Uh,
there's one more. How can Contentful be used to implement AI personalization, and what are the best integration options for AI tools and frameworks?
Yeah, so I mean, there's probably two ways to think about it. One, Contentful's got an API, so you can pull information out of Contentful and use any kind of personalization engine that you like. So, at Autodesk, we were actually using Adobe Target because that's what we had in our infrastructure. But um, I think the first place to look would be to look at nine-tailed and see how, nine-tailed actually, whether that serves your needs. Because it's integrated into Contentful and because it is, um, and because Contentful have bought it, they're likely going to be leaning into it more and more and more and more. And I get rumors they're going to be integrating it more and more over the next year. So it's probably the best first choice for a personalization engine. That being said, keep your ear to the ground because the whole AI industry is moving so quickly. The personalization options are moving so quickly, that in 6 months, my answer to that might be different. But I
Richard,
don't know, Joseph.
I don't think it'll take 6 months. Probably it'll take 6 days. That's the pace at which it is going.
It's crazy, right? I think every time I go onto the internet, I see a new tool trying to do personalization and AI, and I'm like,
True. From audience, any other questions? Yeah. So can personalization be implemented once the content for applications are ready? Will it be architectural mistake to consider personalization at a later stage? That's a very good question. Yeah.
oh, I love that one. Um, Here's my take. It's never too late, you know. What do they say? The best time after yesterday was today. So, but if you are starting from scratch, you get to think about how you're going to implement personalization. And in the case of using a tool like Contentful, you're probably going to think a little bit more about your content models and how you're going to set them up for personalization, than if if you've already got everything built out, you go, oh, today I need to do personalization. And sorry for Apple's have thumbs up, does it all the time. But that's the way I would think about it. It's never too late. It's not like, oh, we didn't think about this, 6 months ago, so we can't do it now. It's we didn't think about this 6 months ago. Now we have to think about it. So what's the best way forward?
Mm,
And I
fantastic.
don't know, Joseph, if you've got any point of view on that.
Uh, as you rightly said, anytime is a good time, but I'm coming from a architectural background. For me, as much as early you can start, it's always better. Otherwise, you are patching up things, and that may not really give good experience to the customers. So, but yeah, like I mean, if you didn't start early, you can start at any given point in time.
And sometimes it is better just to say, look, we might have taken a decision 6 months ago. It's not the best decision for the next 5 years,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes it's worth saying we got it wrong. We need to start again. And sometimes that's absolutely the right decision. You shouldn't stick with what you've done because that was the best decision 6 months ago if it's not the best decision going forward. And there are architectural considerations, there are cost considerations, but definitely I think so. So I think we've probably got time for one more
One more
question.
question. Yes. What are some of the common challenges the organizations face when implementing content personalization with Contentful?
Um, Entrenched beliefs and entrenched uh, um, ways of working, I think is the biggest one. It's it's really interesting. What you'll see a lot is everyone's pro personalization until they realize how it's going to impact them. I'm going to give it an example. I'm going to talk about the homepage of many companies. So the homepage is a territory that in many companies is fought over because there's this concept that what goes on the homepage gets a lot of visibility. And so companies will spend meetings and meetings and meetings deciding what should go on the homepage, what should be the content calendar of what goes on the homepage. And that is a perfect use case for personalization to say, look, stop fighting about it. Let's just tag it for the homepage. Let's tag it for the user who should see it, and we'll make sure the appropriate content gets to the user as well. So there's a mind change. There's a giving up control, right? There's an understanding that experiences are going to become dynamic and that you can't control everything in the way that you used to. And I think that's the biggest challenge. And so how do you get over challenges? Well, you experiment and you get data and you prove it's better because numbers speak, right? And that will beat over opinions. So, I think that's probably the biggest challenge, just, overall skepticism. And again, the best way of beating skepticism, apart from pointing at other success stories, is to say, look, let's try it. Let's do a proof of concept. Let's find a way that we can, start integrating contentful personalization, demonstrate it works. Then you get the organization behind you to roll it out because everyone wants to make an impact and everyone wants to make things work.
That's a right place to end, Richard. Numbers speak. Numbers always win over skepticism. Thank you so much, Richard, on that.
Well, Joseph, thank you for having me, and thank you to everyone who has tuned in today. I've had a fantastic time talking about one of my favorite subjects, and it's been great doing this with you. So thanks to you, Joseph, and thanks to the team for Net Solutions for setting this up.
Thank you. And that brings an end to today's webinar. We hope you found this session insightful and it sparks new ideas for implementing data-driven personalization. And if you have any further questions or want to continue the conversation, feel free to connect with us. Have a fantastic day ahead. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.